Good afternoon and welcome to today's Ad Week webinar, Prove Incremental Impact to the Right Stakeholders, where we'll be talking about how to make the most of your marketing dollars. Today's webinar is sponsored by Cardlytics. I'm Danielle Moore, Senior Manager here at Ad Week's Content Studio, and I'll be your host today. Before we begin, I want to take a moment to make sure everyone knows what to expect from today's webinar and is familiar with the features of our platform. The actual presentation should go somewhere in the 30 to 35 minute range, after which we will have time for audience Q&A. So if at any point you have a question for one of our speakers, just use the Q&A tool beneath the video window on your screen, and we'll get to as many questions as we can after the end of the presentation. Also, it's not too late to invite your colleagues to join us at today's webinar. About 15 minutes ago, you received a final reminder email from us. In there, you'll find a link to the webinar registration page that you can share with your colleagues. There's still plenty of time for them to join us live, but if they can't, today's webinar is being recorded and they can always catch the on-demand version. In fact, that on-demand recording will be available to all registrants, and we'll be sending you a link later today when that's live, around 3:30 Eastern or so. And if you would like a PDF of today's slide deck, you'll find that in the event resources area on your screen. As always, if you enjoy today's webinar, definitely check out the full Ad Week webinars calendar at adweek.com/webinars. You'll see what we have coming up and also get access to our archive of on-demand webinars. We've got a lot of great content to dive into today, so let me bring our speakers up on screen to get us started. Juliana, over to you.
Thank you, Danielle. Hello and welcome. Today, Cardlytics is speaking with leaders in the agency space about incrementality. As marketers, we all face that same question. How do we know that sale would not have happened anyway? It's essential to measure the impact of marketing. We want to show that it did something additive, that it accomplished something that wouldn't have happened organically. And that's where we can lean on incrementality. This is an important topic for Cardlytics to cover as it sits at the very core of what we do. Cardlytics powers the cashback rewards for the largest banks and neobanks. Our focus is to efficiently drive incremental revenue for our partners. And we prove it because we run in a clean, closed-loop bank channel. We're well positioned to measure incrementality in a very definitive and accurate way. But measuring incrementality is just one component. We then have to translate the methodology, the findings, the recommendations to our clients who all have a different perspective, their own ideas. So there's a lot to cover on this topic. Today, we are going to go over real-world examples of common challenges when measuring incrementality and the proven solutions that these leaders have implemented. We're hoping that these learnings can help you as you navigate your own measurement journey. All right, I want to properly introduce our guests for today. We have Kristen Pulver, VP of Affiliate Marketing at Horizon Media, joining us from New York City. Innovation and measurement has always been at the forefront of Kristen's approach to performance marketing. Her dedication and focus on driving measurable, scalable business results for her clients has resulted in Horizon Media more than doubling performance marketing investments 4 years and counting. We also have Matt Wohl, CEO of Acceleration Partners, joining us from Western Massachusetts. Matt has been with AP since 2012 when he was one of 5 employees. Today, as CEO, he leads a global team of 325 employees. They are executing successful partnership programs, and in 2021 alone, generated $5.5 billion in client revenue across 40,000 partners. Thank you both for joining us today. All right, let's set the stage with a few data points. A recent Cardlytics and Incisive survey asked business and marketing executives to each rank which metrics were most important to them when evaluating the impact of marketing investments. There was almost universal agreement. Incremental revenue is the singular most important metric in the minds of business and marketing executives alike. But we also uncovered a disconnect between these two units about whether the right measures were being implemented to measure the performance of these programs. And I imagine that this disconnect, this sentiment, is fueled by the fact that the vast majority of marketers, 69%, are not even measuring incremental return. There's no programs in place that can drive to that metric. And those that do measure incrementality, well, 83% of them are dissatisfied with the process. It's not as seamless or as cohesive as it should be. So there's glaring gaps here. What is holding marketers back from applying such a crucial measurement across their programs? And how can we, as an industry, up-level the methodology, the implementation, and the output of this measurement? The opinions will inevitably vary by stakeholder, but it's important to take all of that feedback into consideration and find that alignment between the business and marketing units. Cue agencies. Agencies have brilliantly stepped up to this challenge. They're often that conduit between varying stakeholders, and as experts in the space, they know the right tools, they know the right methodology and KPIs for each brand. Agencies create that access, that alignment. So Kristen and Matt, as agency leaders, I would love to hear how you and your teams are addressing this gap.
Yeah, so I'll take you through my example in a few moments. And it layers methodologies from our agency, Horizon Media, our client, of course, and our vendor, which in my example is Cardlytics, and how we were able to prove out efficacy of the media investment. Now, it depends on the partnership that you have with your advertiser and your publisher as well to ensure that you have the ability to do these types of measurement, but it's all about creative thinking. And this is a single vendor solution. So the word incremental becomes really difficult to define, as it's a really customized analysis that needs to be done, at least from my perspective. So we think about it in our test and learn environment to kind of inform how we want to approach an always on model, fueled by some of our proprietary measurement tools, while challenging our vendors to continue to prove out their own incrementality as we proceed with our investments. So really digging into the individualized methodologies from different partners is really important, as rarely it's apples to apples when you compare each media partnership.
Yeah, and I agree with all of that. I think the biggest thing that we see is just to make it really simple, getting to an understanding with the client of what their actual definition of incrementality is, right? And that can vary across lots of different types of clients. Whether you have high, loyalty, your customers have a very high loyalty rate, if they have a very high return rate, if it's a very competitive, commoditized business, right? There's lots of different factors. And so for us, the number one thing is always, as an agency, like really understanding what the client's definition of incrementality is, so then we can work with the partners to get to that. And it's very interesting how often actually it's a much more complicated question than it seems, even internally at a client.
Yes, I hear that. Excellent. All right, talking about incrementality is important, but let's dive into these real world examples. It'll be powerful for, I think, the audience to hear. Matt, can I turn it over to you?
Absolutely. So we're going to talk a little bit about an example that was with a mattress client that we had. And essentially, we went through the process that I just kind of described. We spent a lot of time speaking with them about what was incremental to them. And, we're focused only on the affiliate channel, right? Affiliate influencer channel. So unlike Horizon, we're not necessarily managing across the mix of all the different channels. And so what we're really focused on with our clients is how do we get to incrementality within the affiliate channel, taking into account the different types of partners. And this is where it can get really complicated. Different individual partners in a partnership program, an affiliate marketing program, all have different levels of incrementality based on whatever it is that the client wants. So, in this case, the client, mattress industry is a very competitive industry, and they wanted to make sure that the clients that the customers that they were getting were being driven by partners, by affiliate partners that were not just bringing in those customers based on coupon codes or some other type of kind of inducement, right? They wanted partners that were either bringing net new customers based on introducing them to the brand via content, or as is in the case in the mattress industry, kind of using reviews to help the customer understand the differences between mattress brands. And so even if they were aware of the brand, that they could make an educated decision and then go with our client based on the information that they got from the affiliate partner. So what we did was, once we kind of got to that definition with the client, we then had to look at their affiliate program and how it was constructed and the platform that they were using. They were using the Impact platform in this case, and try to figure out, okay, if what they really value is these kind of introductory and educational type content partners, how do we make sure that they get credit in the attribution model and get paid appropriately so that they are induced to continue to do what they're doing and send as many customers as they can to this client? The problem, as some people may know, is that in a last click affiliate program model, if you do have coupon sites or loyalty sites, they're often at the bottom of the funnel and they can get credit for every sale. And so then the introducers who are more content focused at the top of that funnel in the affiliate program may not actually get the credit and get paid. So what we did in this case was a couple different things. We worked with the client to really identify how they were thinking about all the different types of affiliate partners. And we put them into some different groups, and we assigned values to those groups based on where we thought those groups sat in their funnel in the affiliate program. And we took the group that was, we thought really based on the data at the top of that funnel, right, those introducers, and we ended up actually moving them to a CPC payment structure as opposed to the traditional commission-based or rev share partner structure. And the reason we did that was since they were at the top of the funnel, and oftentimes the data showed that there were other partners that came in later and maybe there was a coupon code at the end that was getting the credit, we needed to come up with a way that they would get paid appropriately for being at the top of the funnel and where they wouldn't get lost in that shuffle. And at the end of the day, once we kind of put in this weighted attribution system within that affiliate funnel, and we started doing that, we then realized that we didn't have the right reporting to be able to see what was actually happening when we set up the commissioning that way. So then we had to go and work with Impact on taking a bunch of reports that they had that were kind of custom reports that weren't generally offered to their clients. We took a bunch of them and we kind of stacked them on top of each other to create a proprietary incrementality report that we called iROAS, that then was able to look at all those different parts of the funnel and show effectively what was happening where and what the ultimate weighted attribution in that funnel was. And so what we ended up with was a situation where the top of funnel content partners that were really doing a lot of the acquisition were getting paid appropriately. Other partners that were in the funnel and contributing were getting paid appropriately. And then we could see the outcome based on this new reporting set at the bottom.
And I heard you say iROAS. Was that the metric that you were able to?
Yes, that was ultimately the metric we were going for. We called it iROAS. I think it's being used now in a bunch of different places, that term. And ultimately, what ended up happening was once we did this with the client, Impact took that report that we created that kind of stitched together a bunch of not off the shelf reports, and now that is available to other clients who want to do similar things.
Awesome. So the end goal here was an incremental read on each partner, like introducer partners, all different kinds of partners. The AP recognized the first step is really to capture that full affiliate funnel for an accurate assessment of the contributors. Was it hard to get the client to revamp the campaign setup to really think outside the box and to drive to that incremental read?
So it wasn't overly hard once we figured out that we could actually report on it, right? So the problem is if you can't report on it, then the client contact starts to get a little nervous because, well, how am I going to show that we're actually going to do something with this, right? So once we figured out how to actually report on it, then we had full buy-in from them. And again, as an agency that's focusing on a single channel, right? Some of this stuff is a little bit easier for us because we're dealing like within that one channel. It's not so much a multi-channel issue. But no, once we kind of showed that we could effectively report on it and that they could see the results, then it wasn't a huge lift to get them to push in that direction.
Yeah, having hard, concrete numbers to. All right, so the initial work was done with the marketing team and it paid off. So AP executes this profitable pilot program. What is next? Who do you speak to? What do you say when you're trying to scale this program?
Yeah, so it depends on the company, right? It depends on how they work with finance and all of that. I think there have been other circumstances where once we've done this and we've been able to show like, hey, we can really clearly see the incremental value that's being driven here. A lot of times the conversation then goes to the finance department, right, or the CFO, where it's like, hey, we can show pretty clearly, what we are getting for $1 in the top. How can we think about budgets? Can we, some clients have agreed to just say, what, there's actually not a limit, right? As long as you're maintaining kind of this IROAS that we're getting, right? There's kind of not a limit. That's the ideal state for us. So obviously other companies can't work that way, but it tends to be a much easier sell when you're going to finance when you have that kind of data and you can show that it's pretty definitively not an issue where you're overpaying non-incremental partners or where you're paying 2 or 3 times commission because you're not sure where something is in the funnel.
Yes. Awesome. I love that, Matt. You talk about making sure you're capturing this full affiliate funnel, taking all partners into account, and then B, empowering the marketing team to be able to walk into the CFO and say, I'm doing something meaningful and we should fund more dollars towards it, right? It's a good dialogue to have. It's awesome. All right, so let's switch gears and turn it over to Kristen to hear the challenge that she solved.
Okay, great. Thanks, Matt, for that overview. I found it really exciting that you are presenting this case around an affiliate, performance media angle. So I appreciate that. I feel like it's getting a lot more attention these days. And I love that we're talking incrementality from our world of affiliate marketing. So my problem, right? We have an auto service client and it questioned the efficacy of the Cardlytics media performance and their reported sales attribution, right? This client was used to having our Horizon Media impression trackers on pretty much most ad units, so it helps us with our multi-layered measurement tools. So the client feared that the lack of our agency-provided impression trackers would really make the measurement of the Cardlytics investment incomplete. Now, just to set the stage, we ran a national campaign with Cardlytics, and it drove fantastic top-line results, right? As measured by revenue, ROAS, and of course, Cardlytics does provide a test versus control incrementality analysis conducted by Nielsen, but the client wanted more, right? So what do we do about it? So as an agency, we had confidence in Cardlytics product, but confidence alone will not convince a finance team to invest with a media partner long-term. So we had to come up with some type of like new and thoughtful measurement plan. And in order to do that, we knew we needed to collaborate because the walled garden almost of, the Cardlytics platform being in the banking environments leads to some limitations. So my affiliate team collaborated with Horizon Media's, our agency analytics team. We also collaborated with the client's analytics team as well as Cardlytics to provide a handful of testing scenarios for, to understand how to measure the media efficacy to solve for the client's concerns. So what we ended up doing is, remember, originally we ran a national campaign that was really strong. So this time we opted to run a geo-targeted campaign. But the market selection was critical. So we identified, and really just to get the client's buy-in and overall the testing strategy. So we identified markets that had available inventory for a high volume of sales for the testing period that we identified. And then we tapped the Horizon Media Analytics team to score those markets using an index to identify which markets had client performance most in line with their national business results. So it kind of gives us like a baseline versus how national performance would originally be. Now, after all that behind the scenes work, right, we launched a pretty healthy budgeted campaign And the top line revenue and ROAS remained strong, but that's not where it ended, right? That was just the market selection done by Horizon Analytics. So similar to the original campaign that we had run nationally, the geo-targeted campaign was deemed incremental with a positive incremental ROAS as defined by Nielsen's partnership with Cardlytics. And it delivered on the profitable goals of the investment for that one, type of measurement. Now, the advertisers analytics team took the available data that Cardlytics was able to provide us and validate those purchase details on their end. And then we were able to take some of the national and geo-targeted campaign impression level data provided by Cardlytics, extracted that and put it into Horizon's proprietary tool. And that further proved it out as an effective form of media. And that model suggested increasing investment in the future. Now, I think what's important here is by layering on Cardlytics measurement, we have the upfront top line revenue and the ROAS on our media investment. We have the Nielsen incrementality piece. We have the client validating the sales are coming through, utilizing their actual CRM data. And then we had the Horizon Media Analytics team really focus on the market identification so they can ensure that the markets that we tested were performing similar to a national campaign. So while none of that was extremely time efficient, the value was truly there because it was able to provide those decision makers with the data and the thoughtfulness in our measurement plan to ensure that this media plan was effective. And that became a valuable use of our time. So we didn't have the key signals that the client leans into typically. So by layering on what was available from all these different, stakeholders, it became key in understanding the activation's value to the business. And then that's when we're able to say, okay, now we know the value per conversion for Cardlytics for this particular advertiser. And that's truly what this advertiser's finance team takes away and when determining budgets that we should be associating with each individual partnership. So that's how we took so many different layers and so many different stakeholders to really just kind of bring it together, drive value, and give the business decision makers confidence in what we were able to do.
Goodness, Kristen, there was a lot going on there. So Horizon took, this obviously multi-layered approach to measurement here. Can we just revisit the stakeholders who were involved, and would love to hear more about how you got them all to sort of align on what good would look like for this program?
Well, I must admit, this wasn't the first time we've done something to this level of analysis for this particular client. This client is very data heavy, really likes to lean into the numbers to make decisions. So we knew who we had to have buy-in from on the advertiser side. And we knew we needed to have the numbers and the thought process in order to achieve that. So the reason why we needed so many stakeholders in this scenario is because we needed to work with Horizon Analytics to really index those individual markets. And then ultimately, we had to work with them to feed the data into the outputs that Horizon provides their advertisers. And then, of course, from the client side, we really needed them to validate the data. We don't have access to their CRM. So we needed them to say, okay, from this snapshot of data that we're able to acquire from Cardlytics, can you validate that these sales truly happened in your environment? To give them that confidence that all this revenue and all this sales that Cardlytics is claiming to provide to the brand truly did happen. And the client was able to take that data and in turn feel confident that, that sample set was enough to, really understand the full scope of what Cardlytics can do.
Yeah, it's awesome to hear that the client was leaned in, right? Like the first hurdle is making sure you found your cadence between the partner and the agency. But then in this scenario, the client was heavily involved as well. And it just led to further validation, like healthy dialogue and alignment. So you mentioned time being a challenge. What else could stand in the way of allowing this strategy to be, repeatable across all partners and all publishers?
Well, I think that this kind of has to do with the individual media partner, right? Is understanding what and this isn't just for Cardlytics, it's really any media partner in general, what can that partner provide to your business to really help validate their, their results? Being in the affiliate world, Matt, I'm sure that this would resonate with you, is we're always really putting a lot of our questions back to the publishers, right? Like, oh, you want us to
all the time.
always, you want us to give you this money, you want us to give you this, deal. Like, how are you going to prove that it's going to work for our advertiser, right? Especially with certain scenarios that can be really scalable, right? This timely analysis is not something we do for every single campaign. Every time we, sign a new IO, as an example, we do it once to really prove the efficacy. And then once the client is bought in, we can use more of the easy to report on metrics to kind of continue understanding the performance of the business. And then these kind of high intense, understandings of the media performance can happen as needed as an ad hoc.
Julia, is it all right if I ask a question to her?
Please.
Yeah, so I guess thinking about the time, like one of the things that we run into a lot is that the client, we bring a lot of data and the client says, oh, but can you get me some more data, right? And it's just kind of like this, the end zone keeps moving, so to speak, right? So how do you think about when is it time to just call it and say, okay, we've got the right amount of data, we need to now make a decision?
Well, honestly, I feel like I've had that same challenge, right? It's, they more and more, and that's great. But there's a certain point where we almost have to pause and ask the client, like, what do you need in order to make your decisions, right? It's almost like a sales tactic, right? Like, what other information do you need to decide on whether this was good or not, as opposed to just saying, what else can you provide us? And then kind of almost putting it back onto the client, similar to how I suggested putting it back onto the publisher. If there's no other tools in our toolbox that we see that make sense, that, I would definitely lead with that question. It's just trying to understand, like you said, Matt, right? How does the client define incrementality? If you provide that metric to them and they still want more, you almost have to go to them to say, what do you need to make this decision?
That's great, thanks.
From a partner perspective here, like it's music to our ears to hear this. This is the kind of dialogue, if we have access to and you loop us in as a partner, as a trusted partner, we can bring more to the table. We can hit the nail on the head when it comes to the deliverables and empowering our agencies to report out exactly how the client wants to evaluate the program. So really important takeaway. I mean, this has been excellent dialogue. I want to make sure we have time for a few questions, but the key takeaways I heard here was, one, when evaluating incremental lift, let's not be afraid to think outside the box. We want to make sure we're capturing that full funnel, and that may mean having to revamp campaign setup or just, just really drilling down with the client exactly what needs to be done to get the output that they're looking for. Two, evaluating investment through, these multiple angles, these multiple lenses. It's not easy. It's not quick, but we should be doing it because when you can truly validate that a partner is creating more than they're costing, it's a no-brainer to scale. And then my favorite, takeaway from this dialogue was that, those who are more leaned into incrementality, those who are willing to provide the data points, have that dialogue, those are the marketers that are going to win. That applies to everyone involved, whether it's a partner, an agency, or a client. So it's clear Horizon Media and Acceleration Partners are blazing trails here, all in the name of the most important metric to business and marketing executives, incremental revenue. Cardlytics is on board with that mission as well. So if you'd like to learn more about how Cardlytics can drive incremental revenue for your brands, a scan of this QR code will get you in touch with our team right away. So we're eager to answer some questions from the audience. I will turn it back over to you, Danielle.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for those insights. Such clarity and such great examples of navigating this concept that even as someone who, worked with agencies, worked at agencies earlier in her career, I wasn't hearing this term as much as I would have expected to. So great to get more context around it. As you mentioned, we do have time to take a few questions from our audience, and we'll get to as many questions as we can over the next 5 to 10 minutes or so. If we don't get to your question, audience members, just know that we always make sure they get forwarded over to our sponsor so they have the opportunity to possibly reply offline. First, a couple of quick reminders from Adweek, though. Today's webinar has been recorded and will be available on demand later this afternoon. We'll be emailing everyone a link to that recording, so keep an eye out for it. And if you would like a copy of today's slides, you'll find that PDF in the event resources area on your screen as well. Now, let's get to some of these questions. Our first question, an audience member asks, what can I do today with the tools I already have to measure incremental success?
Yeah, I'll jump in on this one. I guess part of it depends on what tools you already have. But I think assuming that the intent of the question is if you don't have a lot of tools, right, what can you do? I think maybe to the question I asked Kristen earlier, while really getting into the data on this is great and will lead to the best outcomes, there's actually a lot of 80-20 stuff you can do around incrementality. And we do it with our clients all the time, clients who don't have, super robust internal modeling or, have not gotten to that level of sophistication yet. And, one example of that is, as an affiliate program management company primarily, again, looking at affiliate programs and based on your definition of incrementality, just saying, okay, which of these partners do I believe, right, based on my gut as a marketer, which is probably reasonably accurate, really is probably driving more incrementality, and putting them into classes. And then pretty much every affiliate platform out there has ways to commission differently based on different types of data, based on different classes, based on different types of activities, right? There are pretty much every affiliate platform out there, for example, can commission for a new customer if that is what you consider incremental, differently than an existing customer, right? Or can say, hey, we want to pay more to this type of partner than to that type of partner. So even if you don't have any internal, modeling, leveraging your affiliate platform can get you pretty far, as long as you have made that definition internally, which we talked about earlier.
Yeah, the one thing I'd like to add on to that is sort of alludes to, or circling back to a point that both Kristen and Matt said earlier. It was, it's not always going to be, this ubiquitous definition of incrementality, right? So I would encourage advertisers and marketing teams to just ask their partners and have that dialogue and be explicit with what they are expecting. Because I know at Cardlytics, we have this best-in-class analytics team. If they have insight into what the client is looking for, very explicit, not just KPIs, the underlying objectives, the methodology that they have in play thus far, like all of those pieces really help in a partner bringing something super compelling to the table.
Yeah, that's a really great point. Partners and publishers these days, a lot of them have massive amounts of data, and they're happy to put that data to good use for brands. So it's just a matter of asking the question.
Awesome. Thank you both for that. Our next question, and I so appreciate this question having been agency side. This is something that came up a lot, so I'm really interested in hearing your insights here. How do your collateral, like your learnings, methodology, recommendations, differ across the different business units you work with?
Yeah, I can jump in on this one. Really, at the end of the day, similar to what Matt was saying during his example, is understanding what the client needs and how they understand incrementality. And this isn't exclusive to affiliate. I just want to make sure that that's clear. Yeah. This is in general with any media investment that you're doing, whether it's a commission basis or you're buying on a CPM as an example. Mm-hmm. We need to understand what the client's definition of success is. How are they determining incrementality? And in the case where we're looking at just like incremental revenue as an example on your ad spend. Really, the methodology, I think that was a part of your question, it can vary partner to partner. So if we're putting it on the media partners to help identify if their media has driven incremental value for our client, we need to understand the methodology. Like Cardlytics uses a test versus control. some test versus control methodologies are somewhat different than the way Cardlytics presents theirs, as an example. So really understanding that methodology and communicating that to the individual participants in your own analysis that you're going to be ultimately presenting, making sure they understand that methodology. So often I see that, salespeople are like, oh, yeah, we can do incremental. And I'm like, explain to me the methodology. And more often than not, it leads to a conversation with their business analytics teams as well within the publisher's environment. So it's really important to understand that, and then also to communicate that to the end spender, right? At the end of the day, the clients are the one coming to the table with the media investment. So making sure they understand it, and not just the, media person you work with, but also their analytics team, who's probably the one who helps drive the recommendation of how media investment ends up for that overall spend for the business. So I think it's just really about, communication. I think so much in our media buying world, especially with an affiliate, is like a heavy communication piece. And I think just really communicating and understanding across all areas is critical to the success for each business unit that's involved.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Our next question, are these reports on incrementality done ad hoc or on every iteration?
That's a good question. When we say on every iteration, I'll answer the question based on what I think it's asking. Because, as we've talked about ad nauseum, like incrementality can be different for different companies, right? What we find most of the time is that there has to be some level of customization, right? And that level of that customization probably does have to evolve over time as more data comes in or things change, right? So there are certainly standard reports if you have a pretty basic definition where it might be, just a new customer versus a returning customer, something like that. But more sophisticated stuff generally is going to require a more ad hoc customized report, because it has to get to whatever that specific thing is. So Chris, I don't know if you have any other how it works with you all.
Yeah, I would add to that. I think defining incrementality for each dollar invested would just lead to really almost too much data to even comb through. I think that's why we see more advertisers leaning into, MMM type of measurement and modeling, because it kind of gives the entire media investment an output of where it sits in the value to the business. Because for incrementality, the way I've explored it to date has been more with each individual media partner to understand and that's why it's more ad hoc, because for a media partner that has scale, if we want to go ahead and recommend spending at scale, because from the affiliate end, our goal is for every dollar we spend, it returns that many more dollars for our advertiser, where we can do it to prove it out at the beginning of the relationship, we will run those incrementality tests. But every campaign, every month, every quarter, it's too heavy of a lift, and there's only so many hours in a business day. So realistically, leaning into those grander reporting where we can put more of our media investment and more of our data holistically to have outputs is really where I think I see the industry heading towards.
I can support that from my perspective as well. I know at Cardlytics, we run incrementality reports for our partners. And once they see that consistency, first it's getting them comfortable with our methodology, buy-in on that. And then once they see that the reporting, that there's a consistency in performance, it does start to become less, every iteration, more maybe quarterly or biannually.
Got it. Thank you all for those insights. Unfortunately, that is all the time that we have for questions today. I'd like to thank our speakers, Juliana, Kristen, and Matt, all for being here, as well as our sponsor, Cardlytics. Some final reminders from Adweek. Make sure you download the slides from the event resources area and check your email for that link to the on-demand recording, which will be available later today. As always, if you enjoyed today's webinar, definitely check out the Adweek webinars calendar to learn more about our upcoming events at adweek.com/webinars. Again, huge thank you to our speakers for taking the time to be here and share their knowledge with us today. And thank you to our audience for joining us. And we look forward to seeing everyone at an upcoming Adweek webinar.